Hi, I'm Chantel with 141 Design Company, and in this tutorial we're going to go over the techniques used to create this finish on the board from our first Make Your Mark kit, Therese Grosjean. This look was created using multiple colors of paint, well about 3, and we layered them to create a textured look. Within the kit you received this wood block, which is going to be used as a painting tool. The 2-inch chip brush was also included. This is also something we'll use for painting. And 3 colors from the Bungalow 47 paint collection. Wood beam is this nice rich brown. A bright white, which is farmhouse sink. And a creamy color, which is called layered linen. We're going to use all of these colors to blend and create the look on this board. The board was cut specifically to be a little misshapen and a little wonky so that we can create something that looks like an old board that isn't perfect. So we have some different edges to it. Let's get our paintbrush ready. I've got this in real time so that we can take our time and look at each one of these pieces and go over the techniques in depth. Going to get all of our paints out, and I like to just take the paint and put it right onto the surface that I'm working on. So I've got some paper here, which is just our packaging paper, on my table so that I can dump the paints right out. Just a plastic knife to help get, I took about half of that out. And then we'll get some of the layered linen. And finally we'll put some of the farmhouse sink color, the bright white, onto our surface. Now we can blend and play with the colors as we need to. The first thing we're going to do is take that wood block and dip it into the paint, load it up pretty good, and then lightly drag it down the board. You're going to just, it's a little too light, I'm going to need a little bit more. There we go, we're getting it now. And we're going to do a hit or miss type technique or application, I guess, onto the board, leaving it thicker in some spots and thinner in others. This is our base coat to create the texture of what's going to end up looking like an old cutting board that's had years of layer of grunge and accumulation, I guess we'll call it. And you can see I've left that pretty thick. One nice thing and feature about chalk paint is that if you leave it out a little bit even, the paint will thicken up, and if you're wanting to create textures like this, that's a nice trick to do so that you can have a nice thick paint to work with. I didn't leave mine out, so we're going to use this hairdryer to kind of set some of this paint so we don't just blur and mix all the colors. We do want some colors to be distinct from others. And like I said, we were just putting a base coat on right now, or a base texture, I guess is a better word for it. The hairdryer will take it in and out of focus. So I'll have to pay attention to that next time I record. And I put a little bit on my brush and did a little dry brushing here to fill in a little bit of the browned areas. You can see I left the center of that board fairly blank, and that's because I know that's where the stitch is going to go, so I don't need to waste a lot of paint, and I want to just focus on the areas that are going to be visible. We will end up painting the entire board, but we don't need to put the thick textured items in the center of the board. I'm just giving that little spot right there a nice dry because it was a little thicker in that spot. Now we'll come and create some more, layer it on top. So keeping in mind that what we're doing is just building layer after layer in different spots and different heights, so that as the 3 colors blend together, we're going to create a whole new textured look. We'll dry that for a little bit. I'm just using a regular old hair dryer. It's my shop hair dryer. Every now and then I'll also take that tool and kind of smash down or stipple. And this also creates texture in the paint. As I dry it and I see maybe a little bit of a skin go over the top of that paint, then I can come back in and kind of smash it like that. And it kind of creates a whole new texture underneath. This is going to be a little bit of a long video, but I am going to go ahead and keep it in real time just to be able to process and look at each one of the steps. Now let's take a look at what we've got happening so far. Oh, that looks good. Do you see where we've got the buildup in the texture, and some of the spots are a little flatter than others? Some areas are dry, some are still wet, but that's okay because we're going to start blending now. I'll take the chip brush and just kind of blot it in. I don't put a heavy coat on there. We're just going to dry brush over the top and continue to fill in. Maybe mix a little brown in with it so that we've got a lighter color brown. And then instead of just brushing where the paint is missing, I'll take the brush and tap that paint into those areas. This way I won't drag any wet paint and just end up blurring them and mixing them on the board. We'll do our paint mixing on the paper, but we'll do our blending and dry brushing on the board. When you do something like this, it's always nice, I like to anyway, get a darker color and then always grab a white and then another different color, because you can create so many different colors. So for instance, if you were doing this in gray tones, it would be nice to maybe just go ahead and grab black, which in the Bungalow 47 line is called lamppost. Get a black and then always get a white. Then you've got black, white, and all sorts of different shades of gray, everything in between. We're going to get a little bit more of that brown color in here, the dark brown, because we want a little more dark color scheme on here, I think. So what we're going with. We've got a nice light base now in there. Now let's put the dark on top of that. Again, I'm just dry brushing here, or when I say that, it means I'm going to just put a little bit on the end of my brush and just paint only with the little tips of the brush. Let's dry it for a little bit so that we don't just keep blurring the paint together. Come back in here and dry brush some of that dark brown back on. It's a fun process because you really cannot go wrong. When you find an area that you like, just kind of quit messing in that spot and go somewhere else and work on. But if there's things that you're not liking, then you can continue to just kind of brush over the top of it. Now what I am doing, I decided, was that I would like the paint to be a little bit thicker. So I dabbed the block in and then used the hairdryer to dry it and set it a little bit, thickening it basically on the block. And then dragging that down. See how that's creating that texture? I love this hit or miss look using a wood block as my paint tool. Look at that. Oh, there we go. Now we're cooking. We really want to create some chunks for the darker colors to grab hold of. The color we're working with right now is layered linen. And you can tell that's a little bit of a creamier color. And Give it a little bit of a dry, because we want to keep the depth that we just created. We want to keep the texture that was created. And I just have this hairdryer set on low, although looks like I'm playing a little fast and loose there with those open paint cans. Those little guys can blow away fast if that hairdryer gets away from you. So it might be a good idea to set those a little further away, but we're doing okay. We're doing okay here. Drying the thicker areas that we just added on. Get ourselves a little refresh. There's about 1 ounce of paint in each one of the cups, which is plenty for creating this size board. I like to use just what I'm going to need, especially when we're doing these small cups like this. Anything to have too much in there is just going to be, it's not going to save, you know, so we might as well just use it all up. And we'll just keep layering. Now this is going to get a little darker now as we go. We've got some of those lighter colors underneath. We'll do a little sanding later, and that will reveal some of the lighter colors. It'll be harder to see maybe some of the texture, but I'll pull the board up closer so you can see it. But I can already tell this is really coming together nice. Oh, looks like I decided to go ahead and move those so I didn't blow them right away. A heat gun would work nice too. I've just always found the hairdryer is efficient or sufficient for the job that I'm doing. Got a lot of nice texture right down in this area. Another thing with chalk paint, that if you do put it on thick, sometimes you can get it to crack, like a crackle look, just by applying the heat of the hair dryer or your heat gun. I don't believe we had any cracking happen with this board, but I have had it done before and it looks really cool. Okay, now we're adding more of that darker color, and I can tell it's blending. It's even blending right on the board. You can see we've got lots of different shades of browns in here. We go the opposite direction like that. That'll give you a little bit of a cross-hatch look, or that's what I like to call the layered linen. Is basically I just dry brush one direction and then dry brush back through it the other direction. Right now I'm just taking some of that lighter color and dragging it down. Again, just the tips of the brush onto the board. It's hitting the high spots of the texture that we created earlier. That's why that base texture was really important and useful for creating the overall look. And that wood block is just perfect for doing that with. We'll get the handle up here because that's obviously, we should pay attention to that. That's going to be very visible. The stitch will not cover this area. I'll do some highlights in here with some brighter color. See how we like that? We'll probably tone that down again later. Again though, paint is so forgiving. If you go over a spot and you don't like it, paint over it again. Paint fixes everything. And see how that dry brush is just hitting the high spots? Now this texture is really starting to show up. We can blend that right back through. Oh, this is going to look good. That's nice. I like to keep in mind too to maybe take the dark color or darker color that you're working with, whether it's the black or the brown, and hit those corners like that, lighter and heavier in some spots than others. Coming up from the other direction, brushing along the edge. I'll bring this up to the camera in a little bit here so that you can see it really good. But we're doing good. I think we're nearing the end. We'll get the last little bits of that dark brown. As we covered the majority of it too, you can do it the opposite direction if you'd like. You can also take the lighter color, the layered linen, and use that as your base instead of that brown to begin with, if you want a heavier brown look on the top. Now I'm going to take this and just very, very lightly go over the top. And it's just creating just a few highlights here and there. We'll see what we think of these. Blend that down a little bit so we don't create a line. You can see that texture popping through. That gave us a very nice overall look. Coming back through the other direction. This is a good example. I know that those lines, they bugged me a little bit. I did not care for that direction, so I try to blend those out. But like I said, you can always go back over it. Chalk paint's also something that dries very quickly. And if you're in a warm climate right now out in the sun, I would definitely paint in the shade if you want to paint outside. Okay, let's take a look. I'll bring it up here closer to the camera so you can see it. Try to get a good angle. And we'll dry it. But like I was saying, if you're painting outside using a chalk paint, especially in the summer months, do it in the shade. Now, something like this might be nice to do right in the direct sunlight because the heat from the sun is going to just thicken the paint so fast for you, because we want that thick paint for this because we're just creating that texture. Until I decided I didn't want to blow those little cups around, so I went ahead and put the tops on them and set them to the side because we are finished with the paint from our paint cups in the kit. And it's looking a little light, but it is a lot darker in person. You saw the photos at the beginning to see the dark colors. Let's try to hit this. Drag this along here because it's just hitting. See how it's just hitting the texture spots? I thought this might highlight a little bit more for you, so you could see where the texture was. See, I'm just taking that straight down the top of the board, and where the bottom of that block is hitting are the high spots from the texture we created at the beginning. Now the technique that I'm using here in the kit for this board obviously can be done on a number of different things. We've got some other great paddles and great boards in our shop, and they would all look amazing done in this particular technique. And then just grabbing different colors. Grays would be so pretty. From Bungalow 47, there's a color called Tarnished Silver that's a nice dark gray that would be really pretty to blend other colors with. There's Tarnished Silver and another lighter gray color called Metal Roof. And you'd find all of these paint colors on bungalow47.com. And if you're going to order online, the pint sizes would be plenty. You'd get a lot of use out of those. And like I said, get the darker colors and always get a white, because then you've got the capabilities to make so many different colors from that by just blending a little bit. Look at that. That just darkened that right up. We grabbed a little bit more of that brown paint out of there. Okay. We have everything painted, and now we're getting ready to sand it. This tool you can pick up at your local hardware or Menards, Lowe's. It's available on Amazon. This is just a sanding tool. My paper is not very strong, so that's not coming off real quickly. But it will come off the edge. Let me get a better grip on this here. And now we're going to sand all along the edge, because what's going to happen is we're going to get down to some of that layered areas where we built up our layers and reveal some of the color from underneath. I also find this blends and can act as an eraser if you, for instance, when I went through and highlighted with the lighter color, if I felt like that was too much, because it just went on really lightly, sanding it will just take it right off very easily. So if there's any regrets, the sandpaper is going to fix it right now. And then blend. We're going to get in here and give a little wear to this hole. Even the hole is a little on the wonky side. I don't know if you noticed that. I didn't want to be too extreme, but I also didn't want it to be perfect on either side. Using the plastic knife to kind of just scrape some of that off. The edges are laser cut, so they do have a dark burnt edge to them. You can paint them and it will cover, especially with the chalk paint, but I kind of like that dark edge, so I usually just come back through and I don't even sand 100% of the paint that got on the edge off, but I do take off some of it so that it doesn't look like it's just paint that got over the edge of the board. Just cleaning it up a little bit. Now I'm going to come through here and buff this and just kind of wipe out the loose paint, dust and things. A paper towel is a great tool to use for this, because the paint, you can also buff it very nicely. I didn't have a paper towel handy, so I just had this extra batting laying around, so we're just using that. And it works fine. So with a chalk and clay-based paint, to set the paint, you can go ahead and just buff it like I just did, and that will set it. Or you can hit it with a lacquer finish or a matte finish top coat. See on the edges there where I sanded it, and now how the texture underneath is kind of popping right through? That's just from using the tools, the two tools we had, the wood block and the paintbrush and going back and forth and back and forth. For a final finish on the boards, you can give it a spray. I like to use a lacquer spray, and I like more of a satin finish, and you can spray that over the whole thing. I also had some of this Distress copper, I think, patina from Tim Holtz, and these distressed ink pads. These were not in the kit, but they're a little extra if you have them. I just thought I'd show you how they work. So if I'm going to add any extra darkness or around the edges, you can do this with your paintbrush and the brown paint and just kind of drag it along, or one of these Distress ink pads. This color's a little bit lighter. Pretty sure the tops were mixed up on these. So we'll grab the darker color here in a minute. But this is just going back over the edges and just kind of giving it a little definition using the ink pads. Mine are an absolute mess, but they just keep on inking, so I just keep using them. I've had them for a while now, and I use them a lot. The chalk paint is such a matte finish that the inks go right on top of it very nicely. Yeah, that was switched. So we'll switch these back. One of them is a walnut, and then we've got this lighter one. Use this one kind of blends that so it's not such a stark line. We're also going to take some of this. Let's try this. I don't know how. You want to give it a good shake. It is a patina. It's kind of, oh, it's a copper. That's right, it's copper. I think that was a little bit heavy. We probably should have gone a little lighter on it, but let's wipe some of that back off. This did end up giving it a kind of a fun overall coppery tone. And there's other Distress inks sprays that you can get. And they really work nice with the matte paint finish of the chalk paint. I don't know that they'd blend as well if it was just an acrylic paint. But that, you can see the patina that just added. One more layer of color, which is just this multicolored buildup of paint texture. Those products can be found at craft stores. I know they're at Hobby Lobby, so you can get those at Hobby Lobby as well. And it's looking pretty good. We'll probably give it a spray over the whole top. Probably go outside and do that because you'll want to spray in a well-ventilated area. Thanks for joining me in this tutorial. This is the final look of our board once the clear coat has been applied. I think this is a much better look at the texture that we created on the board today using the wood block and the dry brushing. You can see it was a lot darker. The light was kind of washing out the color schemes. But continuing to use that wood beam over the top and the lighter colors, and then sanding back through to reveal the texture and the bumps basically that we made underneath. I love this finish. You can even see some of that copper patina on it after applying the Tim Holtz spray. So thanks for joining me. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you soon.